What is up, guys? It's your friendly neighborhood web war fanatic, and I got another deck building video for you guys today. So today we are going to be taking a look at Nebula here, and we are going to be building a deck for her. And I do want to give a huge shout out to the Bum Bum Inspector. He requested that I do a deck building video for a more underrated hero like Nebula. So we're going to be trying her out here. I have never played her before, so we will see how it goes. And I already decided the villain that I want to face with Nebula, and I will review that villain at the end of this video. So basically with Nebula here, she has a couple different things going on with her kit. So I have her cards put up here on the Hall of Heroes website. So one big thing is her alter ego here that I want to really lean into. So her alter ego ability is cybernetic upgrades. As a response, after you play a technique upgrade, you can draw 2 cards, limit once per round. I think that this is a very powerful effect because all of her technique upgrades right here, like the Cutthroat Ambition, is just a 1 cost upgrade and has the technique keyword. So if she plays any of these upgrades right here, then you can draw 2 cards, which will pretty much just refund the cost of getting this upgrade down, which is very, very nice. The upgrades here, the way that Nebula works is that they have a constant effect. So like for example, for this one, while Nebula is in hero form, her attacks gain piercing and overkill. And they also have a special ability here. So this is a thwart activation, remove 3 threat from a scheme. So in Marvel Champions, any card that has this special keyword right here, the effect cannot trigger on its own. It needs like an external card to trigger the effect. So an example would be like Nebula's hero ability right here. Force response combat protocols. After your turn begins, resolve a special ability on each technique upgrade you control. Then discard each technique upgrade resolved this way. And she also has another card here called Lethal Intent. Here, actually, you could choose up to X technique upgrades you control and then resolve each of their specials, right? So if you just play this technique upgrade right here, it has a special where you can look at the top 3 cards of the counter deck, and this card won't put the rest back in any order. But we can't trigger that special unless there's another card that tells us that we're able to do it. So that's kind of how Nebula works. So because of that, I think the big key that I want to do whenever I'm building Nebula is definitely leaning into justice, the justice aspect, because I want to be an alter ego a lot, and I want to have safe ways for her to flip down here to trigger this alter ego ability. And another big thing, this is actually a huge complaint that I hear about Nebula, and that is her hero ability right here, the combat protocols that we just talked about. It is a force response. So since it has a force word right here, it means that we must trigger it. So after your turn begins, we have no choice. We have to resolve a special on each technique upgrade we control, and then we have to discard each of the technique upgrades. So unfortunately, if you want Nebula to have piercing and overkill, or if you want her to keep the retaliate, if you are starting your turn in hero form, you have no choice but to resolve this attack here, even if there's like, no ideal target for you, or you have to resolve this thwart right here, even if there's no threat to remove, you have to resolve it, and you lose this this passive effect because you have to discard these upgrades after you resolve their special with her combat protocols hero response. So that means that the way to play her is very, very limiting because you can't necessarily control the timing of whenever you need to resolve these technique upgrades here. So I think the best way to play her is to be an alter ego, and you can play technique upgrades, and you can flip over to hero form whenever you're ready to trigger them. Whenever you end your turn, villain has their turn, and then whenever you start your next turn, if you are starting that turn in your hero form, then you will trigger those specials. So I think that's the way to play Nebula. I'm not entirely sure if that's going to be correct, but that's the way that I'm thinking on so far based on the way that her cards read. So definitely we want to lean in justice aspect. So we're on Marvel CDB here on a different tab, and we're going to build a new deck for Nebula. Okay, so in the justice aspect, I think what I really, really want to build on is going to be confuses here. So let's go ahead and put some confused stuff in here. We're going to start with the allies here. Let's go ahead and put Professor X, one of the best confused allies in the game. He's just a solid 3-cost ally with 3 thwart. After he enters play, choose one. We can pick the one to confuse a villain. That's going to be more valuable than sending an enemy or reading an X-Men character for this deck. So let's go ahead and add him to the deck. And he's just a strong ally that can throw for 3 and will allow us to confuse a villain so that we can flip down and trigger this alter ego ability here by playing technique upgrades. And it can give us control over the scenario because we don't have to be in hero form unless we want to trigger the combat protocols. Because we don't want to trigger this in the timing that we don't want the effect to trigger, right? And that might still happen, but we want to try to combat that as much as we can and only trigger these specials whenever we actually want them to trigger. Okay, so we have Professor X. Let's also put in Dazzler here. She's also a really cool ally 4-cost ally after she enters play, confuse enemy, which can be the villain, so we can prevent the villain from scheming. And this can also work on a minion as well. If the villain's already confused, we're going to put so much confuse in this deck to where we may have some extra confuses. So let's go ahead and add it. And then I also want to add arrows here. It's an awesome 2-cost ally, which is good with this 2 Thwart. And it's very cheap for us if we need a defender for whatever reason. As a response, after you play arrows from your hand, confuse a minion for each mental resource you use to pay for him. So he's a great way for us to confuse minions here. This is just a strong ally to add to this collection of these confused allies here. And we don't necessarily need too many allies because we don't need to block too much. I'm hoping with this deck, with all the confused that I plan on putting in. Yeah, let's go ahead and put the our big confused card here, which is going to be the one with Rocket's face on it. I think it's Think Fast. Yeah, okay. So it's a 1-cost event here. It says play only if your identity has the Guardian trait, which luckily Nebula has in her hero form. So this card will work great with Nebula. Nebula does not have the Guardian trait in her alter ego, but that's not a big deal because this is a hero action only, so we only play this in hero form only anyways, where we do have the Guardian trait. So we take 1 damage and we confuse a villain. So it's a great way for us to get a really cheap confuse off. It's just 1 cost, and we can easily flip down and allow a villain to scheme because they will be confused, and then they won't add any threat to the main scheme. Just a great way to get those confuses off for a Guardian. Let's go ahead and put 3 copies of Think Fast in this deck here. And we also want, this is a newer card that came in the Sidelock pack, but we also want 3 copies of Upside the Head here. So this is a 1-cost event. As a hero response, after your hero makes a basic attack and damages an enemy, confuse that enemy. That's going to be so good for us. That another really, really cheap way, just 1-cost event to get those confuses off. Let's go ahead and add 3 copies. So now we have 3 confuses here, 3 confuses here, and then 2 confuses with Dazzler and Professor X, but also 1 more confuse for minions for arrows here, right? So it's going to be, that's already 9 confuse that we have in the deck. So we have many, many ways to confuse the villain, and then Nebula also has this technique upgrade right here, the evasive maneuvering, where the special is to stun or confuse enemy. So this will also add into that confuse that we really want. So I think, yeah, there's going to be a lot of ways for Nebula to confuse the villain. And if we are over confusing for any reason, we also have Upside the Head second effect here. So after your hero makes a basic attack and damages an enemy, we can confuse the enemy. If the enemy is already confused, then we can stun instead. So that's just a great way for us to get the full benefits from Upside the Head, because if they are confused, we can get a stun off. Yeah, so that's really, really good synergy with the amount of confuse that we have in this deck. And we really want to take advantage of flipping down because of that hero ability being limiting and because of this really strong alter ego ability right here. Yeah, another thing is that Nebula has hit points, print hit points here of 9, which is pretty low. So I think I do want to go ahead and add in Endurance here. This is a great card that can go in most decks. I usually put this with every hero that has 9 hit points unless I'm really running low for deck space, but I think it's a solid card. It's a 1-cost upgrade. You get plus 3 hit points, so that'll bring Nebula up to 12. So that's going to add for her survivability in a really cheap way here. Okay, and then let's go ahead and add the double resource here. So we want Genius, double resource for Mentals. We want Strength, the double resource for Physicals, and then we definitely want Energy. So almost every deck that I put in these guys because they are very, very good. They help pay for a lot of more expensive cards that we have. And then let's take a look at our cards here. Do we want to add, we have Dazzler as a 4-cost Justice ally. Eros is a Justice ally. Professor X is a basic ally. And we have a bunch of 1-cost events. So I think for this deck, we don't necessarily want to put in the Power of Justice right here, because this will double the amount of resources when paying for a yellow card, a Justice card. And most of our Justice cards here are just 1 cost. We don't need that double here. Professor X is a basic card, so it can only work for Dazzler and Arrows. That's not enough targets to make it worthwhile. And I don't think we want the power in all of us either, which is the same exact thing as a Power of Justice, but for basic cards, so double when paying for basics. And we only have Professor X here. So I don't necessarily think that's necessary. We have Nebula's Ship, which is her resource generator. It's a 2-cost resource generator that we also cannot use the Power of cards to pay for because it's an identity-specific card. So I think that would be good for that. And then since we are flipping down a lot, we definitely want Under Surveillance here. So this is a great card. 2-cost upgrade attached to the main scheme. This will increase the target threat by the main scheme by 4. So that would just give us a lot more breathing room to flip down if for whatever reason we can't get it confused off, or if we are able to confuse a villain, but then they get an extra activation like an advance or something like that during the encounter phase. So I definitely want this card in there. And let's go ahead and put Counterintelligence as well. This is a really good Justice card too. 2 cost upgrade. Interrupt when any amount that we place on the main scheme. Discard counter intelligence and prevent 3 of that threat. So really, like another safety mechanism for us if we're flipping down for us to have this card here to just prevent some threat because we are going to be staying in Alter Ego a lot with this deck here. And then let's see, we have 4 allies. Like I said before, I don't think we'll necessarily need too much blockers because we're staying in Alter Ego so often and we're just trying to confuse. But I think having one more extra ally won't hurt. In Nick Fury, he doesn't necessarily have that confused synergy that we're looking for with the other allies, but he's amazing. He's the best card in the game. 4 cost ally when enters play. Choose one, remove 2 threat from a scheme, draw 3 cards, or deal 3 damage to enemy. Right? Having versatility and freedom to do whatever you need him to do in that specific situation makes him so good. And that's partially why I think Nebula is kind of limiting here with her hero ability because it's a force response, so you must trigger it. It's just less freedom to do what we want and less possibilities to kind of switch up the plan and adapt, right? I want to play in the most adaptable way, and Nebula's hero ability kind of limits that. But Nick Fury is kind of the opposite. He's the most adaptable ally because he can remove threat, he can draw, he can do damage, and he can still thwart or attack on top of that. So one of the most versatile and most adaptable cards in the game. So let's go ahead and add him there. And then I think we want, so early game it might be hard to get these cards down. And since we're spending so much time in Arch Ego, I think I definitely want Meditation here. So this is one of my favorite cards in the game. 0 cost event. It's an Alter Ego action, so we only play this inner Alter Ego. But luckily, we will be spending a lot of time there because of the Confuses. Exhaust your Alter Ego and then play a card from your hand, reducing its resource cost by 3. This is super duper powerful to play cards for really, really cheap, especially early game when we don't have any resource generators out in play. We can play Dazzler for cheap. We can play Gamora. We have very expensive allies in this deck. Arrows is only 2 cost ally. Dazzler is 4 cost. Gamora is 3 cost. Nick Fury is 4, Professor X is 3. So all these allies except for Arrows is going to be a great target for the Meditation here. And Meditation works for, one thing we're talking about with the Power Novas, this works for any card, right? So let's add 3 copies. This can work for Nebula Ship, which is an identity specific card. This can work for a Justice card or a basic card like Nick Fury. And then since we're adding all these Meditations in here for the early game, I think this card is actually going to be really good for late game as well for Nebula because we're flipping down all the time. So we're always going to be in Alter Ego. If we draw a big ally, we can always play it with the Meditation. But let's go ahead and add more targets for it. And I always want to play more resource generators. So let's go ahead and put Avengers Mansion here. 4 cost support, just really, really strong. We can exhaust it and choose a player. That player draws a card. Just a great target for us to have with Meditation here because we can reduce expensive cards to play. And drawing a card gives us more resources and more options to play. Let's definitely add the Helicarrier as well. Another support card, 3 costs, so it can be a target for Meditation. We can exhaust the Helicarrier to reduce the cost of the next card that player plays this phase by 1. It's another super strong card. So now we have 3 resource generators here. I probably would want to add more, but I don't think Nebula can put any more as a Guardian, right? She doesn't have access to like the Quinn Carrier because you have to have the Avengers trade to be able to play her. And then she just doesn't have any more accessible good resource generators other than these guys right here. And let me see, actually, do her techniques share a trade with her? Let's see, because then we could actually do team building. No, yeah, it just has a technique keyword, right? I think she's just a Guardian and Outlaw. Yeah, so I was thinking about possibly team building exercise here, right? This is a kind of a pseudo resource generator like the Helicarrier. It can reduce the cost of the next card we play if it shares a trait with your hero. But Nebula doesn't really have anything that shares a trait with her hero. I think we have Arrows as a Guardian ally, but I mean, that would be our only target pretty much. Yeah, so I mean, that's not going to be a good card. I think that's okay for the resource generators here. We have some pretty cheap cards. Really, the only expensive things are like Dazzler, the expensive allies here, which we don't have that many of. So I think that might be solid there. And then, let me see, what else should we put in there? We could always put in more allies if we feel like we need it. Let me see. I think a good card that we can definitely slot in would be the. Oh wait, we could actually put in a player's side scheme too. Do we want to do that? Because we build support. No, I mean that would be just Nebula Ship and Helicarrier. I don't think the build support is going to be that good here. Um, Yeah, actually, another thing. So one thing that I think that Nebula is very, very lacking in, and I think that will work with a side scheme. So Weapons Mastery right here. This is a one cost upgrade. It's a technique upgrade for Nebula, and especially it's to do 4 damage to an enemy. So this is actually Nebula's only source of damage in her entire hero kit, which is not that good, right? So she's kind of lacking a lot of damage because this is kind of the only, or this is the only way for her to do damage. And when you play this card, you have to trigger it, the special through other means, right? So like Gamora here, if you play Gamora, you can choose a technique upgrade and resolve special. You can use Nebula's force response here. Yeah, so she doesn't have a lot of damage in her kit, so we want to enhance that. So I think we want to put um, Lay the Trap. I believe that's the name of the player's side scheme here. Yeah, so this is a one cost side scheme, and huge shouts to Daring Lime, who uses side scheme in our game against Magneto. And I actually kind of even forgot about this side scheme here, but he's shown me how good it can be for like just upping our damage here. So it's a one cost player side scheme, and you play by paying one cost, and it has three. Actually, he uses against not against Magneto, against Venom Goblin whenever we need whenever whenever we really needed that burst damage to gun down stage 3 of Venom Goblin whenever we were playing Spider-Man and Captain Marvel. But yeah, later trap here, really good card. When defeated, the player who defeated this scheme deals 5 times player damage to villain. So we can just keep this side scheme in play, and then whenever we clear it off, we can do an extra 5 damage if we need it. And I think this is going to be good for Nebula just because she's lacking so much damage in her kit. This will just give us a little bit more damage here while playing the Justice aspect. So I think that has a lot of synergy. Speaking of damage, right? We really want to enhance his damage. And since we're confusing a lot, another key card, I think, and I think I was planning on putting this card, but I just kind of forgot now. But it's a 2 cost upgrade, Float Like a Butterfly. Max 1 per player. As an interrupt, when a character you control attacks a confused enemy, increase the amount of damage that attack deals to that enemy by 1. That is so key for this deck because we have so much sources of confuse in our deck. We're probably going to be confused locking the villain. And then with this card here, we can use the Weapons Master. If we resolve the special here, this is an attack activation because it has an attack keyword. So it would deal 1 extra damage. So instead of just doing 4 damage to an enemy, we could do 5 if that enemy is confused like the villain with the Float Like a Butterfly. And since it's upgraded, this card will stay in play and just enhance all of our damage if we're attacking a confused enemy. So we definitely want to add a copy of that in the deck as well. And let's see, we're at 38 cards here, and the deck's actually looking. I am liking the synergies that we have. I don't know how well it's going to play, but I'm liking our confuses here. We have so much confuses with Think Fast. We can also stun them with Upside the Head if they're fully confused. We have some damage here, which will work out with Nebula's lack of damage, right? And she's, in my opinion, she's kind of shoehorned into Justice because of that hero ability not having the adaptability and having such a strong alter ego ability. So since we're playing Justice, we don't have as much damage as like aggression. So I think Lady Trap works out really well with that. Same with Float Like a Butterfly. That's just complete amazing synergy with Nebula in the way that I want to play her. With counterintelligence, more ways to flip down. We could always just add in more allies here. I think actually, and this actually what I'm thinking here with meditation, right? If we play meditation, we have to play a card from your hand, reducing its cost by 3. Uh, but then we also have exhaust, right? It says that you have to exhaust your alter ego. So I think I actually want to put Ready to Rumble here. And this is actually a card that I've never played before. So we'll see if it ends up being useful. It's a 1 cost upgrade. As a hero response, after you change form, discard this card and ready your hero. So we can only trade this in hero form. But if we play Meditation Alter Ego, we get exhausted, play expensive card, and we flip over. If we have the Ready to Rumble already set as an upgrade, we can actually discard it and then ready up right away. So that might be useful to helping us control the board. Let's put 2 copies of it so we can max out our 40 card deck here. And I think that will be solid. Not entirely sure how Nebula will play, but I do think that she's pretty limiting because of that hero ability that we keep talking about, just not having the adaptability. So I don't think that this deck at least will be that effective against Magneto or Loki even, especially not Venom Goblin or Ronan, just because all these guys have access to Stalwart and Steady, and that's going to make it a lot more difficult because we are very dependent on the Think Fast and the Upside the Head. We're dependent on trying to get these confuses off, because if we can't, then we don't have necessarily the thought removal or the way to control the villain or the way to mitigate damage in hero form, because we don't have 9 hit points and no defensive events and no way to heal, right? So we're kind of locked in here to playing confused. And playing with Saz is not my favorite way to play, but I just think that with Nebula, that will probably be a fun way to play her, and also the most effective way to play her. Um, at least from what I've seen of her so far. And yeah, so I think that she can't handle those top tier villains at least consistently, at least with the way that I'm building her. There may be another deck build, and if you guys are able to do that, definitely send me y'all's decks or send me playthroughs of people, taking down, Ronin or like those high difficulty villains with Nebula, because I would love to see that. But with this deck build that I build right here, I'm not sure that she can do that. So the villain that I had in mind that I really want to try with her, and I have the villain pulled up right here on another tab of Hall of Heroes, is I really want to face Nebula with Nebula, right? I think that's going to be a super fun, thematic matchup, right? This can be the hero Nebula can be like the Nebula that's a guardian, like an MCU, and then this can be the Nebula like from the past that's still working for Thanos. So I think this would be a really fun matchup with Nebula versus herself, Nebula. In Marvel Champions, with the unique rule right here, because there is a unique symbol on the Villain Nebula and a unique symbol on the Hero Nebula, we actually aren't technically allowed to play this matchup, right? It's kind of illegal to have Nebula versus Nebula because of that unique rule. But, this is just a fun game. We can kind of play it however way we want. So I do want to try this matchup just because I think it will be very thematic and fun and a very tough challenge, because Nebula is a very difficult villain, despite not facing one of the more difficult villains like Ronin or something like that. But I think this would be a good way to test out the confuses here, because Nebula does not have Steady or Stalwart. Um, Actually, she can gain it. So she can get Stalwart here with like a technique upgrade with her evasive maneuvering, which is pretty nasty. I think definitely the Villain Nebula is a lot stronger than the Hero Nebula. But we can see how this matchup goes. I think it'll be a lot of fun. So yeah, that's kind of the villain that I want to try to take on with this Nebula deck. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. Definitely let me know down in the comments what you guys think about this deck. What do you guys think about the matchup? And yeah, just let me know if there's any cards that you agree or disagree with, or if you have any more questions for me with the synergy and everything of how I decided to build this deck. Once again, we're a little bit short on allies than what I'm normally used to, but I think it's okay because of all the confuse that we have. We're gonna be spending a lot of time in our alter ego, so hopefully having just 5 allies here will be okay. I know a lot of people play with even less allies than 5. I usually play with more, so I'm not gonna be used to having that. It's a little bit less adaptability and versatility that I want, right? Like we were talking about earlier, because allies can, they can lord for 2 or attack for 1 or block if we need them to. It just gives us so much versatility in what we're able to do. So having less is definitely not going to be my favorite thing, but I think that it's going to be okay because they all have confuses and all that stuff. So yeah, hope you guys enjoy this video, and I will see you guys in the next one, hopefully against Nebula with Nebula.